All right, evening everyone. I just got home from work. That's why I'm dressed like this. But yeah, it's like 2 in the morning right now, or a little afterward. Anyway, I just wanted to give you a quick update of everything that's been happening. I know it's been a long time since I've made a video or anything, mainly because nothing's been happening. Um, we're kind of at a standstill right now, and that's mainly because I'm dependent at this point on the mechanic entirely. There's nothing more I can do in the parking lot of the mechanic shop to fix the thing up. I can't do anything with the water. I can't wash it. I can't test anything else. I can't put propane in it. There's nothing else I can do until the engine is fixed. And the mechanic is really busy, so it's taking a long time to get it into the shop and get him working on it. But it's finally happening tomorrow. Today's, well, no, 2 days from now, Monday. Monday morning, we are pushing it into the shop, and he's going to do it. Now, the good news, well, I'll start at the beginning. When I got the van here, I didn't know what was wrong with the motor. As I said in my first video, that's one of the reasons I got it so cheap, because there's something wrong with the motor, and based on my investigations, I believe that something went wrong while they were using it, and so they basically just parked it. It looks like they might have tried to fix it, but they weren't able to, and they didn't put enough effort into it to really get it fixed. I guess they didn't value it enough to bother. But basically what I was told by the guy who sold it to me was that there might be his quote was probably a bent push rod tube. Now, I know what a push rod is, but I've never heard of a push rod tube, which told me he was either full of crap or didn't know what he was talking about. And I was right. He didn't know what he was talking about. But basically, when we first started working on the motor, we did a compression test on it to see what cylinders had compression, and we found that 3 of them had full compression, 175 pounds, which is pretty high compression for a V8. I was surprised. The number 1 cylinder, which is the furthest forward on the driver's side, had 0. Zippo nothing. And the passenger side, 2 of them had 25, one had 75, and the other one had 50. So at that point, I'm thinking, oh, that's not good at all. It's very, very bad. And so the next thing we did was take the valve covers off and remove the rocker arms and the push rods. Or should I say I said I did it. It's what the mechanic told me to do, so that's what I did. I figured the more I do myself, the less I have to pay him, and he's kind of a buddy of mine, so he lets me do that kind of stuff to save money. Anyway, long story short, I took all that stuff off, and what I found was every single push rod for the intake on the passenger side looked like that. I'm going to take it out of the bag so you get a better look at it. It's oily, that's why I've got it in here, but they look like that. That's like a 45-degree bend. Now, you don't have to be an expert on engines to know that's bad. Every single intake push rod was like that, which means something went wrong with the timing chain, and the valves opened at the wrong time, and the piston came up, hit the valve, and bent the push rod. Now, when I saw this, if it were just one, I wouldn't have panicked so much, but given that it was all 4 of them on that side, and it made me panic a little, thinking, okay, this motor's shot. I'm going to need a new motor. I started looking at the costs of crate motors from Advance Auto, and it was like $1,700 plus the core charge plus tax. And then I had to consider how much the mechanic would charge me to put it in, because I don't have the time or the know-how to do it. He said it would be about $1,000 in labor to put it in. Now, unlike most mechanics, he doesn't just simply charge by the hour for a job like that. He said he charges by the hour until you hit $1,000, and then he stops charging you. Once the labor hits $1,000, that's it. And he's not charging you any more than that. He's just going to get the job done and charge you $1,000 in labor, which I thought was really cool. That's how many mechanics do that. But anyway, I was still looking at a minimum of $2,700 plus core plus tax, and that would leave me with basically nothing in my budget to fix up anything else. So I was stressed. I was pulling my hair out, what little I have, for the next 24 hours. And then the next morning, I went back to talk to him more and see what more we could test. And being the master mechanic that he is, he handed me this short little hose about that long, and it threads right into where the spark plugs go, and then you connect an air compressor hose to it. And he called it a blowdown test. And what you do is you use the compressor, the shop air compressor, to push compressed air into the cylinder, which forces the piston down, and then from there you'll be able to hear air escaping if there's a problem. Because we were assuming that the valves were all bent. All the valves that had gotten hit by the piston, they were all bent. The cylinder heads were ruined at least, and very likely at least one of the pistons had a hole in it. When you have something catastrophic like that go wrong on a motor, it's very likely that something like that is going to happen. So we were hoping that by putting the air into the cylinder, we would at least be able to figure out where the air is escaping. If we hear it coming out of the intake manifold, we know that it's the valves that's bad. If you hear it coming out of the exhaust, you know that the exhaust valve is bad. And if you hear it coming out of the crankcase, you know the piston is bad. And of course, obviously, all the push rods are out, all the rocker arms are out, so all the valves should be perfectly closed and sealed up. So ideally, we would get no air escaping if the engine was perfect. Shockingly, that's exactly what happened. We put compressed air into every cylinder. Every single cylinder held compression perfectly. He was right there when I was doing it, watching. He said it was perfect. There's nothing wrong with the motor. Amazingly, Dodge actually did something right. I'm not a fan of Dodge, but apparently they did this right, where when they built the piston and the cylinder head, the valve comes down, and if the piston hits it, it hits it perfectly flush, so that it doesn't bend the valve. It comes up and it hits the valve, pushes on it, and the thing that gives is the push rod. I guess they're designed to bend to prevent serious damage on the motor. And I asked him, what are the chances that the lifters or the camshaft got damaged when the valve hit the piston? And he said 0. He said those won't be damaged. It's just going to be the valves or the piston or both. So, amazingly, despite the horrible catastrophic thing that happened to the motor, it's still intact. And all I need to do is have him fix the timing chain, whatever went wrong with it, fix the timing, put new push rods in there. I'll probably have him put new rocker arms in as well for good measure. And that's it. The motor's good to go. All you got to do then is flush out the fuel system, probably replace the fuel pump, and it's good as new. And that's a fraction of what I was expecting it to cost me. So it was like a huge weight off my shoulders at that point. Suddenly, I was absolutely golden. Suddenly, all my hopes had been, come to fruition, and it was the great purchase that I thought it was going to be. The van is going to be fantastic, and I'm very happy, very optimistic about what it's going to be. And as soon as the engine and fuel system are fixed and it's up and running, the next thing is going to be new tires, and then after that I'm going to bring it home and I'm going to start bringing it back to life, and it's going to be awesome. And I hope that I'll be able to get it back to life in time to take a two or three small weekend trips locally before I take my long trip in September. In September, I'm planning a 2 to 3 week trip down from Michigan into Georgia, down into near Florida probably, and then work west, spend some time in Texas, and then go as far west as Las Vegas, and then work my way back up into Michigan. It's all going to be in the van, so I have to make sure it's basically perfect before I go on a trip that long. So that's the status right now. I'm waiting for the mechanic. On Monday, we're going to push it in the shop, and he's going to get to work on it. I'm basically just going to be standing on the sidelines and watching at this point. And that point is, once that's done, once the engine is up and running, that's when I will make my next video, because I can't really do anything else until then. So that's the update. Now the next section of this is going to be me talking to you and telling you about the history of the van, how I found it, everything I had to go through up until when I made my first video, because it's quite a story. And I'm also going to name it. But before I do, I want to introduce you to my new little traveling partner. this here is Frank. He's my little buddy. He lives with me, and he's going to be coming on the road with me. He doesn't like to be picked up, so there he goes. And he shed it all over me. Boy, it's that time of year. Wow, look at that, just terrible. Anyway, Jesus, that was a mistake picking him up. I'll be right back. Okay, clean myself up. I didn't want to go through the rest of the video with hair all over me. This is the time of year when he sheds, so I just have to live with it. I brush him every day, but anyway, that's not the point. So you'll be seeing a lot more of Frank. He's going to be coming with me on my trips. He's going to be a RV kitty. So, all right, back on topic. I'm going to tell you about what happened at the beginning. Now, I was looking for a small Class C, maybe a Class B. I didn't have a lot of money to spend. I was thinking maximum $3,000 if the thing was in great shape. I was probably going to have to go with a late 80s, early 90s, and you start to get into these problems where if you go too old, you wind up dealing with carburetors, 3-speed transmissions, and they're just horrible gas mileage. They're really not good for long trips, and it ends up costing you a lot more just to drive the thing than if you had invested a little extra money at the start and gotten something newer. And so I was trying to find this balance between affordability and, newer equipment that would be better and more reliable. I didn't think I'd be able to afford a Class B because they tend to be pretty expensive. And then one day I find the van that I'm working on now on Craigslist down in Maryland. And obviously I'm up in Michigan, so that posed a problem. But he was asking $3,500, I think, for it. And he said that it said that the engine had a problem, but it wasn't specific as to what. But it said the inside was good and so forth. I called the guy, talked to him a bit. He described it to me. Wasn't 100% honest about what he was selling, but whoever is. So I wasn't surprised. But I told him that since I'm up in Michigan and I can't come to look at it because I've got a full-time job, I can't come down there and spend 3 days to check this thing out only to find that it's no good. I told him, in order for me, if what you're telling me is true, the only way I'd be able to take a risk on this thing is if you sell it to me for a really low price. I said the best I could do is about $2,000, which is a steal for a 96 Class B with 56,000 miles on it. I mean, 56,000 miles. When I saw that, I couldn't believe it. I said, whatever. If 56,000 miles, whatever's wrong with it, I can fix it. So basically, he hemmed and hawed about that a little bit. $2,000 is a low ball, and I said, yeah, it is a low ball, but I'm taking all the risk here. If you want to get the engine going and then talk to me, I'll give you more money. But as long as the engine isn't running, I have to worry about what it's going to take to fix it, worry about having to ship it up here if I can't get it fixed, and all that kind of thing. I'm taking a huge risk here. So if you can sell it to somebody else, by all means, go ahead. That's what I told him. But I'd offer you $2,000 for it. And he thought about it for a while, and he said, well, can you do $2,200? I said, all right, $2,200, you got a deal. So we did the deal. My uncle lives down in Maryland. He drove down to where the van was and sort of was the middleman between me because I didn't want to just send the guy $2,200 and have him disappear on me. I didn't know this guy. For all I knew, the van didn't even exist, and it was all a big scam. So fortunately, my uncle was ready and willing to help me out. He went down there, checked all the paperwork, checked the VIN number, made sure they match, and everything was good, and did the deal. So up until then, everything was going smoothly. I then called a mechanic down there because my initial intention was to have whatever was wrong with the motor repaired and then fly down there and drive the thing back up to Michigan. Knowing what I know now, it's a good thing I didn't, but there was a mechanic shop about 8 miles away from there, from where the van was, that had they had their own towing service as well. So I called them, I said, go get it, bring it to your shop and check it out, let me know what's wrong with it, and we'll go from there. So they did that, they towed it to the shop, and about 3 days later, they call me and say, well, looks like you have a bent valve. We think you should put in a new motor. I said, wait, it's got a bent valve. How do you know? Well, there's no compression in that cylinder. I said, okay. And just because of a bent valve, you think I should put in a new motor? Did you test anything else? Do you know if the pistons are gone or if there's a bent rod or anything? No, but due to the liability of it, we think you should just put in a new motor. It's the safest way to go. I said, well, sure, it's the safest way to go, but how much is that going to cost? Well, probably about $5,000. I said, that's not happening. It's never going to happen. I'm not spending $5,000 on this thing, ever. And at first I was mad. I thought they were trying to take advantage of me. Just, okay, so you inspect it for 2 minutes and you want me to put in a whole new motor. You got to be out of your mind. And we went back and forth for a day or two, and I finally decided to have them take it to another shop. I looked online. I found a shop that had great reviews. I thought it was going to be great. I had it towed to that shop. The guy looked at it. He said he looked at it briefly. Those were his words. Yeah, we looked at it briefly. I said, okay, what do you think it needs? I think it needs a new motor. Why? What test did you do? Did you do anything? He said, well, just based on what we were looking at, we think you need a new motor. I said, okay, what are you looking at? What are you seeing? Tell me what you've done. What tests have you done? Have you done a blowdown test? Because my mechanic friend who's working on it now was advising me on the side. I was telling him what they were saying, and he was telling me what questions to ask. And I told me to ask, did you do a blowdown test? And the second mechanic got completely impatient with me and talked to me unlike any... I would not talk to my worst enemy the way this guy talked to me. He was just mad at me for asking questions. How dare I ask questions? Either you put a new motor in this thing or come and get it, because we don't want to work on it unless you're putting in a new motor. And they kept talking about liability. It's our liability if something goes wrong afterward. I've never heard of such a thing. In Michigan, the mechanics will do whatever you ask them to do, and it's your problem. Maybe Maryland has weird laws that made them not want to work on this thing because they didn't want to take the risk. Well, basically that's where I was. I was either spend $5,000 or figure out how to get it back up to Michigan without the motor. So again, I was stressed out. I was thinking, oh, what have I gotten myself into? This thing's going to cost me way too much money. I don't have this kind of money. What am I going to do? So I started looking at shipping costs, having it shipped up here. At first I was going to go down and get it, but I ran the numbers on that. That would have cost me like $1,500 between gas and renting a trailer and borrowing my friend's pickup truck, which I was uncomfortable with, and not to mention taking time off work. And after hunting, I got quotes for shipping from shipping companies as high as $2,500 because the thing is so tall. Very few trucks can fit it on there because it's so tall. Finally, I found a company called Jackrabbit Transportation, which is apparently down in Florida, and they quoted me at $800, which is way cheaper than I could have gone down and gotten it myself. So I said, yeah, great, $800. You know, one of the other companies that was talking to me said, well, that sounds awfully cheap, and you might wonder how they're going to get it up there, and they might not offer you the best service. And I said, they can pull it up here with a donkey for all I care, for $800. As long as it gets up here in one piece, I don't care. And they ended up bringing it up on that rig you saw in my first video, on that big trailer behind the pickup truck, which I was surprised. I thought it would be a semi, but it was just the two vehicles on that trailer. So they got it up here at a really good rate. I got high praise for that company. So if you ever have to ship a vehicle, look up Jackrabbit. They're pretty good. And so that's been the... that was the hassle, getting it up here. The mechanics, and by the way, going back to the mechanics down in Maryland, after we investigated a little bit into the motor, we realized that they didn't do anything. They told me there's no compression in that cylinder. Well, you didn't even remove the spark plug. I took the spark plugs out myself to do the compression test, and trust me, those had not been out ever. Those were the original spark plugs that had been in that van since 1996. There is no way that they took those spark plugs out to check the pressure. They did nothing. Neither one of them did. Plus, there was no battery in the engine. I had to put a battery under the hood myself. How do you do a compression test with no battery under there? So not only were they pushing me to get a new motor, they were flat out lying to me about the tests that they had done. Both of them. And not to mention, they were both wrong. We did the blowdown test. There's no bent valve. There's nothing wrong with that motor. They were just completely full of crap and just didn't want to deal with investigating. They just wanted the $5,000 it would have taken to put in a new motor. So I don't know if it was just a fluke that I got two bad mechanics or if all mechanics down there are like that. But thank God up here in Michigan, I've got a good mechanic who's really reasonable, really reliable, and I trust him. So he's going to get the motor running like a kitten again, and it's going to be a long, arduous journey, but it's going to be worth it. Now, because of everything I just told you, all the hassles I've gone through, all the worries, all the risks, all the stress, and all the money, I've come up with a good name for the RV. Everybody knows, every good RVer knows that like any ship captain, you have to name your RV. You have to come up with something that fits, that means something to you, or that suits the rig in some way. And based on everything I have thought of, everything I've experienced, and everything I expect to experience in the future, I have decided on African Queen. That's right. The Explorer is going to be named African Queen. And if you don't understand that reference, look it up. Do your research. Look up African Queen. It's a movie, and you'll understand why I've named it the African Queen. And it's going to work. I'm going to have decals made, and I'm going to put African Queen on the front and back, maybe on the sides. And it's going to be very funny because I think very few people, relatively speaking, will get the reference. Young people particularly will not get it. They'll think it's some kind of homosexual weird joke or play on words of some kind, but it's going to be funny. It's going to be funny to see the looks on people's faces going, what, African Queen? What does that mean? I'm not going to tell them either. I'm just going to tell them the same thing I told you. Go look it up. Look up the reference. It'll make sense once you look it up and you'll get the humor in it. So that's what's happening now. I got Frank giving me trouble because he's been alone all day, so he wants to cuddle. So I'm going to let you go. And we're going to go back to the beginning. I'll tell you again, we're going to push the van in on Monday, start to work on it. Hopefully it'll be done within the next week. At which point, when it's done, I will make my next video. So I appreciate all of your patience, I appreciate all of your interest and all your feedback. I've gotten some very good feedback so far, and I'm very happy about that. I'm hoping that some things in my videos might help future beginners to RVs, might help you avoid mistakes by learning from mine, or might help you even learn how to fix something that you didn't know how to fix before. So that's the whole point of all this, to just take you along the journey and see where things take me, and who knows what this is going to end up being, but I'm enjoying it so far, and I appreciate all of you who've watched and commented and messaged me and encouraged me, and I really appreciate it. And please feel free to continue that and ask any questions you may have. And yeah, that's all. So take care, everybody. Keep an eye out for my next video. Have a good one.